Hello, my name is Igor. I'm a financial trader. Today is the 10th of May, and uh, and I'm back. I'm back with new observations, new ideas, and hopefully this time I will be able to stick to some sort of consistency in my posting. Um, so yeah, I know it's been a while since I showed up the previous time, so I think it's important to set the stage and to define the framework in which we are now, basically at the end of the first half of 2025, and also what we could expect in the second half of this year. And since it's been a while, I think it's quite important to go way high and to assess the situation at the top level and go down from there. So, my perception of the current historic moment in politics and in economy, in global economy, is like this. I call it the fragmentation and the flip. Why the fragmentation? Personally, I wouldn't claim that I have developed this theory all by myself. It's not true. I was relying heavily on Ray Dalio's. I'm sorry if I'm butchering the spelling here. Observations in his brilliant book, Principles for Dealing with the Changing World Order. But as a very quick introduction to that, I was studying like 5 years ago. I was discovering Stoicism, and that actually led me to study a bit of a late Roman history as well, and what happened around the world. And based on that, and coupled with my other historic observations, I developed this understanding of a global unification and fragmentation cycle of human civilization on this planet, basically. And it looks like this. At first, it's fragmented. It's like individual tribes or countries or whatever is the current form of whatever is the current dominant form of human socio-economic self-organization. And then among these tribes or countries or entities, whatever, emerges one which is able to produce not only temporal leadership, but sustainable leadership and sustainable systems and institutions, which in turn enable it to provide some sort of stable foundation for economic power. And that leads to rapid progression of that entity among others. And in the case of this entity, robust economy usually coincides with a robust and very sustainable political structure. And in the end, this country ends up ruling the world. And I call this country Rome because Rome is the most recent example, and we are still living in the post Roman or next iteration of Roman culture, which is quite directly linked to the Rome we know we know about from historical books with in everything like the rights citizenship framework, rights human rights framework extrapolated to the broad population, even terms for government buildings are the same. So this is the current version of the Rome. But the problem with the Rome is that it tends to age and decline. And its decline, although in views of other researchers are sometimes attributed to external pressures. In my own perception, this often comes from internal decline, which is related to age, the age of the government structure, the age of the economic structure. And conglomerations of people, collectives of people, usually exhibit behaviors of individual peoples, of individual humans. That's quite understandable because humans on larger scale are expected to behave similarly to what we express at the level of each individual. And when we grow old, we become rigid, we become sometimes childish, we become a bit erratic, and that basically marks the decline. And in the case of an individual human, that usually marks the end of each life or a rebirth in the next generation. And so it happens with the global Rome, which I have defined few ago. And this current moment, 2025, May, the 10th of May, I think we're witnessing the late Rome in action, but it's a bit different this time. I think it's quite obvious that the role of the Rome nowadays is that the United States of America, are the Rome of the globe at this moment. But it is also quite obvious that it's becoming old. Some people say that the country is young. It's like 290 and 49 years, so like 2.5 centuries now. But actually, it's very old. It's quite old. And if you this is a topic for another conversation, but we could and we probably should delve into history, and we'll see that 250 years without dramatic change for a country is actually quite long. So it's a commendable achievement for this system. But at the same time, and you can also from some angles you could perceive the states as an extension of the European order, like the next iteration of the European order, in which actually uh, the Rome was a foundational part for that. Once again, today's talk is not we're not aiming to go deep into history. It's just an overview. So it's getting old, and what symptoms of this oldness of this age are visible right now. One of the most interesting ones is complexity of the taxation system and also its rigidity. Uh, Good growing states and economies are usually defined by low taxes and simple system for taxation. And the progression, I can produce lots of historical examples of that, and I probably should because it's very interesting and it's one of the few things that you could actually track. The system becomes more and more rigid. There are more and more taxes, and the rates are higher and higher until it's there are basically two major stages to that. The first one is when the rates are high and when they firstly in eyes of some part of the population outweigh the benefits of the citizenship or residency. And the second stage is when the taxation system is so complicated that it's impossible to actually to comply, and that's when the real decline begins. We are far from that at this point, but you could admit that in eyes of lots of Americans these days, uh, not I shouldn't say lots, but maybe lots. I don't know. I'm an outsider, so my observations are based on what I see from my vantage point from afar. But there is a certain trend that some Americans are not happy with the benefits they get by paying taxes to the country which issues their passport. So this is one tendency, and also you can see it on a corporate level, of course, because lots of corporations, even the names which are deeply associated with the economy of the states, they prefer to actually incorporate and reside in, for example, Ireland, which is quite famous for being a jurisdiction for some major American names. So it happens both on at the level of individual and the level of corporate entities. The second sign of age-related rigidity and disease is inefficiency. Inefficiency, and inefficiency is also uh, dual, or maybe there are even three sides to that inefficiency. And let's start with individual. At the beginning of a good system, there is always a strong incentive to work hard. And since the system is very well defined, you get what you expect to get. This is a significant part of an American dream, at least as it was shown to the world, to the outside world in movies. You work hard, you play fair, and you get this beautiful house in a suburban area. You are able to afford a car or two. Your wife doesn't have to work, and you are able to sustain children, two, three children. And it's a good theme for creation of a sitcom. But you could also go the other way, and if you are more of an entrepreneurial spirit, you can create a company and rise to the top. But it's quite obvious that it's not the case anymore. And lots of people in the states here, I can state it for sure that for lots of people, housing is not affordable now. And even to rent a house, they have to be uh, very inventive. Some people work several jobs. Some people team up to rent a house. Once again, I don't have the numbers and I don't have any hard science to back this observation, but I see the cultural shifts. It's visible, uh, even in the humor, which we can see in internet, in personal stories and lots of personal struggles which leak to the internet. It's visible, uh, and this is the sort of personal side of efficiency, the economic system. But there is also a corporate side, and a good example of this is the Magnificent Seven. The Magnificent Seven is Apple, Google, Microsoft, and companies like this. And there was a particular story which highlighted the lack of efficiency there quite beautifully, in my opinion. And the story was about the deep sea, the new model which was supposedly deployed by the Chinese. And it was an efficient model, and it got everybody scared since it sort of put lots of projections of Wall Street analysts about the demand for the semiconductors, the product of NVIDIA, which is supposed to hold the technological moat between the states and the rest of the world. And all of this has been put to risk because the Chinese showed, or at least they claimed, and they were able to at least substantially prove their claims of their ability to create advanced model with far less resources and financial resources as well. Uh, you don't have to. I don't have to be. How do you say it? I don't have to prove myself too much in this domain. I think it's common knowledge at this point that there are lots of inefficiencies in the American economy, and it's absolutely natural, because there are lots of mega, ultra, like planetary scale enterprises there, and it's the larger the scale of the enterprise, the worse and the less efficient is the governance structure. It's common sense. The more complex something gets, the less efficient it is. That's basically a pattern that is seen everywhere in the nature, and that's the reason, one of the reasons, that there are not so many megafauna, for example. Like you don't see these giant dinosaurs or even giant mammals anymore because it's not efficient. It's difficult to sustain. So big structures grow inefficient, and it's also quite noticeable in the states these days. The other side is government and government related. So there is clear economy, clear business. There is government, and there is also in between. And the other trend to take notice of is the merging of the government and the business. The mega structures, financial industrial conglomerates, which where 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 it is really difficult to distinguish where the state ends and the business starts, and the reverse is true as well. So the government, all governments are not very efficient. The larger the government, the more complicated it is. Same laws apply here, but they are actually worse because you don't have to be efficient. You can mask your inefficiency for a very long time and be perfectly safe with it because you don't have to be efficient to make money. You collect taxes, people pay. So if they don't, they face the consequences. So it's quite easy here and understandable that the governments become efficient way faster than businesses. And the sectors of economy which became merged with the government the most are the least efficient. Main points of dissent among Americans are the banking, which is, since it's heavily regulated, is one of the most merged, uh, and it was heavily criticized during crisis of subprime, of the crisis of 2008 and beyond it. And that actually led to the creation of Bitcoin and a political power behind that. There is also defense sector, which is notorious for its inefficiency, and you can find multiple proofs of that. How actually how expensive it is to produce even basic replacement parts for military equipment. Obviously, this equipment is very is powerful and it's deadly and it's one of the best in the world, but if not the best in the world in some aspects. But it's quite obvious that to produce this equipment, they have to utilize the amount of resources which is excessively high and is not justified. So that's why it is another sign of inefficiency here. Um, Another aspect is political leadership, failure to produce uh, visionary political leadership. It's more or less a problem of the whole developed world right now. And you can also, I think it's a bit trickier with the states now because you probably see what I'm talking about now. It's a systemic phenomena which we're witnessing right now, and my guess is that actually we're not seeing the moment when the states actually go down and they go down spectacularly. I think that these problems, lack of efficiency, the age, the excessive uh, and pervasive governance structure, which actually limit growth, they are being recognized by political and business elites in the states. For example, Ray Dalio, which was huge to my own to sort of finalizing and bringing order to my own thoughts about this process. He's an American and he is well known to be in touch with government regulators in the states and outside of the states too. So I think I think American elites know about this, and I also think that even on the outside, problems of the political system are noticeable. And one of these problems, which I think is valid, is the crisis of the ideas behind the institutions. And this some people attribute it, for example, for the so-called woke ideology, which is referred as the woke mind virus by some parts of the current American leading governmental group, which is basically the ideas behind the modern Western civilization, but maxed out to the level when they actually become counterproductive. The identity politics, the mm, personal rights, which are exercised so meticulously that they actually become oppressive to the society. Exactly in the way, like the overdoing of this is exactly the way the overdoing of the government of the governance in of the state and the governance of the business, which was good because it was well defined, but then the complexity, the overgrowth, the age-related overgrowth becomes stifling, and that's exactly what happened. This is a valid symptom, but my perception, my idea of this, and maybe I'm just trying to make sense of semi-random events which are being driven by the historical necessity. But my understanding of this is that Americans actually know what's happening. And that brings us closer to the current moment. Once again, today, the goal of today's talk is to define the framework from which we can build in our next conversations. And I think they have this understanding. As I mentioned, there are lots of brilliant thinkers in the state, and they are very well interconnected, and the system itself is still quite flexible despite the problems which I have outlined before. So what I think they are trying to do now with the recent sequence of American administrations is they are trying to scale back their presence in global politics and global economy, while also capping potential global rivals who would like to take their place in global arena, the place of the global policeman, so to speak. And this framework could actually help you make sense of what's happening and help make sense of political, ideological, economic disarray now, and probably make an assumption that it's not disarray. It's like a sequence of steps aimed at scaling back strategically and tactically retreating, and maybe creating another framework for the world. So America could fix their problems with their inefficiencies. And one of these problems is state debt, for example, because all of these inefficient structures, governance structures, military industrial complex structures, these expenses and eventually each inefficiency manifests itself as an expense are funded by debt. So that's why it's critical. It's critical to pare back global commitments, be it military commitments, political commitments, even business presence, because all of these demands money, and it's getting difficult to inject more money in the system because it's quite hard to maintain a manageable level of inflation. So right now, what we're seeing at the moment is these exact plans in action. So that's why the states have left Afghanistan. That's why the states are paring down, at least significantly paring down their presence in NATO. That's why they try to negotiate with the major economic powers of the world while also putting economic pressure on them, like it happens with China right now. And we're in the middle of this process, and it's too hard to see how it goes. But this is like I think this is uh, the most realistic assessment of the current thing. And the important thing, which I almost forgot to mention, is the not $1 million question, but like $1 trillion question is: will the states be able to pare down, become a more of a regional power and a regional economy and global exporter at the same time, while also maintaining a dollar as a global leading reserve currency? We're seeing interesting movements in the currency markets right now, actually. Unfortunately, uh, or maybe fortunately, we're seeing a market, a foreign exchange market, which is quite unusual because global FX is notorious for its low volatility. And now it's not the case. The currencies are moving, and the euro is strength is becoming stronger. Sorry, um, against the dollar, and not only euro, other regional and similarly obscure currencies are getting stronger and stronger. And will the states be able to maintain that role still at a manageable level? We'll see. Because if not, it could very well be a structural risk for this whole plan, if it even exists. If it's not a product, if this plan is not a product of my humble effort to bring maybe some order which could not even exist in this to what's happening around. So we'll see it relatively soon because and we're going to the more tactical level at the moment. Obviously, the next conversations I will be more tactical and more related to actual stuff to do, to buy, to invest in. But my conclusion is that the current level of tariffs is not sustainable. It's not sustainable. It will either resolve in a hot war, maybe some time within a couple of years with China and the Chinese allies and the states. But given the fact of how liberally the states treat their allies, their military allies, they are not betting to for this kind of situation. And I think there's a good chance that they will demonstrate their willingness to be flexible with tariffs. So this situation, the tariff situation, is supposed to be more or less settled, I think, within 1 quarter, 2 quarters at best, which coincides with the second half of this year. And I also I'm also quite in favor of of the scenario in which the world will not go to a full scale trade war or even a hot war at this moment. I think at this moment everybody more or less agrees that it's not feasible now. So I the primary scenario for me is like it will become balanced for at least few years in the future. But what it will cause, the damage has been done, and everybody clearly understands that Uncle Sam is not interested in being the global policeman, the global bank anymore. And there will be a repricing, and it is already happening. For example, as I mentioned before, you can see it in euro strength, strength, strengthening. I'm having problem with this word, like becoming stronger against the dollar, and also it will bring the long desired life into a European economy because lots of its parts were actually outsourced to the states, and you can perceive military industrial complex as you wish, but you should also agree with the fact that it's a huge channel of injection liquidity into economy because these large military equipment producers have lots of subcontractors and they pay salaries to lots of people, and rearmament is a very big deal for Europe. And not only that, I think there is a good chance that in the coming years this will spill into other areas, and Eurozone could start thinking about becoming more economically independent from the states. And in terms of innovation too, basically all of the innovation was outsourced to the states again. Will this mean that the states are basically done uh, at this moment? Not at all. It is still and it will be the market with the deepest liquidity, with the most robust framework for doing business. And we should also take into account the efforts of the current administration and the future administrations, which are seemingly willing to optimize the system, to lift the tax burden, and to make it easier to do business. For example, even by rolling back the ideologically driven programs, which were often criticized for their pressure on corporate efficiency. So that could be a positive scenario. But what's about to happen and what's already happening is a rebalancing. Rebalancing is going to happen for sure. And this is actually a successful scenario because it it will mean that the states are successful in manage scaling back their exposure to the world in a manageable way while also allowing growth of other poles, so to speak, so to speak, like other centers of economical, political, and military power, while also maintaining a manageable, applying manageable pressure on them when they are perceived as a threat, like China, or maybe just being a bit rude with them, like we see it with the European Union. So rebalancing, at the very least, is a given. And there are other trends which could be observed and capitalized as well. But I'll finish with rebalancing, and I will name these trends, at least the ones I am able to produce right away, because there is a number of them. So in terms of stocks, it will mean that the U.S. market is likely to be not to be the leader in growth in the coming years, or at least in my perception. That doesn't mean, once again, that doesn't mean that it's done. There is still lots of innovation, but elevated volatility is a fact. And I think it will stay like this, maybe jumping uh, in the coming years, that's for sure. That brings us to the importance of not only being long, magnificent seven. These companies are done, in my opinion. One of the good ideas, one of the good short ideas I produced in February was short Google. Uh, an unthinkable idea, maybe even a year ago. But now it's like 20% of highs, and it's lagging behind the indices. Why? Failure to adapt, failure to be mobile, failure to be flexible, like the current world demands. Uh, yes, shorting these names and actually many more names because there are lots of zombie companies in the American economy, and seeing bankruptcies of these companies is actually good. This bloodletting is necessary if the states are to become the economic powerhouse again, regional at least. So having long, short portfolio, maybe alternative ways of structuring, not only doing this on the spot because you gotta protect yourself from elevated volatility. That's why I'm venturing into options these days. Um, as a means to express my trades in the States, and also being long some alternative names in European Union, in Asia maybe could be quite feasible and interesting in the coming years and even in the second half of this year. Speaking of Bitcoin and crypto, I think if we are really about to witness the accelerated fragmentation of the financial system, which is a consequence of political fragmentation, we will see more and more boundaries to the movement of capital. And decentralized finance is the most obvious answer to that. And this, and actually not the strategic cryptocurrency reserves, is the most important factor. And I think we'll actually see, and we already know that it's happening, but it will become official. Uh, Governments transacting in cryptocurrencies, and of course they will aim to to create their own cryptocurrencies, maybe hybrid ideas. We're seeing that as well, but it will definitely be a good thing for the overall market of decentralized finance. Other points of economy will be interesting. It's economy overall outside of the of the stock market will be interesting to watch because it will still grow because in the more fragmented world you need infrastructure, you need local infrastructure, even in the old states like very well established states and economies like Europe, for example. Fragmentation manifests itself um, in different ways. For example, one of these ways is the normalization of war. So it started in 2022 with Russia and Ukraine. Then it's Israel and Hamas, and now it's India and Pakistan. And actually, it invalidates one of my core points because back in 2021, when I was foreseeing some of these events, I was researching alternative regions of growth. And India, due to its non-alignment both with China and the States, was one of these prospective growth regions. And it turns out not to be the case because of their conflict with Pakistan. And both of these countries are nuclear. So these growth regions are another topic for discussion, and we will discuss it a bit later. But what could this global instability mean? For example, just to produce one example, is local tourism. Expect repatriated capital, which will maybe go home from the states or from somewhere else, to be invested in local infrastructure. And tourism is only one sector for that. There are lots of sectors, and there is also there will be, and it is already happening, a growing competition for what I call sanctuary jurisdictions. It's an idea of of a state in which people can reside or can obtain legal residency or passport, citizenship, and also park their money. And these jurisdictions, we have actually examples of these jurisdictions because nothing new is happening under the sun. And in 20th century, we saw Singapore, we saw Dubai, um, financial and Ireland, financial hubs, uh, hubs with good legal frameworks to house business, which Switzerland, of course, we could not forget that one. They stay neutral and they let people and companies come in, park their capital, deploy uh, substantial parts of that capital, capitalize on that, and provide these sort of beacon of growth and calmness in the world. So I think there is a huge market for countries like this, and we will discuss projects, country-wide projects like this in detail in the coming videos. And obviously, my surroundings hint and my current location hint at this tendency because I'm in El Salvador. So I think that's it. So to wrap it up, to summarize the topics that we have discussed today, the current world order is old, and the current leaders are old and not that efficient as they were before, primarily the United States. We see rising competition among some other big players. And what I think the states are trying to do now is to scale back in a manageable way, to scale back all commitments, with the exception scale back all their systems, political, military systems, with the exception of dollar. Although we could see some developments in that domain, but it's unlikely. I think they are very interested to keep dollar as the primarily means of international transactions, business activity, and reserve currency for as long as they can. And what we see now behind the veil of chaos, perceived chaos, is exactly that. And it's not the end, it's far from being the end. Although lots of these situations which we see in the States and on global arena are very emotional, but it's far from the collapse, the supposed collapse some people are talking about. The reality of the moment, and it's a given, and it could only accelerate if something goes wrong in this supposed plan of the states right now, is rebalancing, is localization of capital, and actually some growth, rebalancing from the states to the rest of the world. And it could very well be the case that it could happen in a constructive manner, and it could be a boost to the global economy. So balancing out longs in American stocks is a good idea, but we are living in a world of high volatility and it will persist. So exploring alternative ways of structuring your trades, maybe with options, could be a very good idea. And it's a way which I have decided to go right now. And decentralized finance is in a very good place strategically because it will, in my opinion, more and more expand into the space in which decentralized systems are now finding themselves conflicting with each other. And there are also opportunities outside of the financial domain in real economy, so to speak, and they are maybe a bit difficult to find, but some of them are quite obvious and are recognized by the market at the moment. And they are happening because of that rebalancing, because of that repatriation of capital, as I call it, because everybody in the world will be more inclined to become as self-sufficient as they can afford at the moment. Obviously, without reshoring much of their manufacturing from China. But that's, by the way, is exactly what the states are trying to do now. We'll observe their efforts and their efficiency with uh, very attentively, and same as it is with the finance, it is with the jurisdictions. While big established jurisdictions find themselves conflicting and maybe repatriating some capital, there will be new ones which, like cryptocurrencies and like Bitcoin, will strive to fill in the vacuum to provide these neutral foundational points where people can hedge their uh, legal exposure to some of these jurisdictions and also park their finance and deploy some of it. So I think that's it for today, and see you around.